So today we will be learning how to make an egg. We're going to do an easy, over medium, over hard type egg. They're about the same in terms of how you would cook them. It's just a matter of how long you cook them for. So to start, I've already turned my stove on with the pan on it. We're going to add some oil. About that much. You don't need a lot of oil. This is a nonstick pan. If you're using a stainless steel pan that is not nonstick, you would you would have to get the pan very hot before you really put any oil in it. There's a test called the mercury bead test, where essentially or water bead test, where you would essentially put a drop of water on the pan, and if it beads up and rolls around, it's hot enough, and then you can put oil on it and start cooking. I am in my very small kitchen, so everything is kind of smushed together, but I'm using a spatula. Any type that has this sort of like flat sort of lever will do. For example, if you're cooking on like a flat top stove, and you have one of those big metal spatulas, those work really well for flipping eggs. I don't have that because this is a college style apartment. Yeah, so for right now, we're waiting for this oil to heat up. I usually judge when it's hot enough. You can sort of feel the heat coming off of it if you tilt it, and you can see how sort of runny that is. That's when you know that your oil is starting to get hot. I try to sort of collect it all in one general area, just so it makes flipping it easier. We're going to do 2 eggs. I'm going to try to do one over easy and then another one closer to over hard, over medium. I'm going to be putting these in my dinner, but it's fine. So we've got my plate balancing, and I'm going to end the video and flip the camera around to try to show you guys how I crack the egg. Okay, so I don't have a whole lot of setup here, but you're going to take your egg, you want to hit it on some sort of flat surface. I've got my counter sort of over here. You can hit it on like a corner of something, like the corner of your pan, but that does tend to, make it break a little bit with a little bit more pieces. So just like one firm tap, not too hard because you don't want to squish it, but you do want to break the shell. As you can see, let's see if we can get it to focus. It does not seem to want to be focusing, but you can sort of see that I have now cracked that egg. There's a good dent in it. And then you're going to poke your finger into there, so you can sort of see it is now, you can see the egg now. So you're going to poke your finger into there, and you're going to release it into your pan, and you probably can't hear it because I don't have a good microphone, but you can hear it sizzle usually. Let me show you. So you can see it. It is now turning white, and this is basically just a few seconds after. You can sort of see that if I push it, it'll hold its shape. This one has sort of already set, so it's not going to do that. My pan is not centered on the stove, but you can see that this section is starting to turn white, and once that turns fully white, I usually flip it and then season the other side, but you can also season this side. Here's where you would do like salt, pepper, those kind of things. I usually just do salt. I don't really like cracked pepper, so we're going to just do salt on this one, and we're going to make this one the over easy. So here you can still see like a little bit of the dark pan underneath. So we're going to wait just a little bit longer. Your heat should be on low as well. You don't want this to burn immediately. You do want it to cook. Best way I've heard it is eggs are fragile. You know, you put it in, it's going to cook the bottom too quickly without cooking any of the rest of this sort of white on top that you can sort of see is still kind of clear. Now you can no longer see the bottom on the bottom of the pan. If I stick this under, you can't really see. I'm going to try to do this one-handed. So you can see that I broke that and it basically sort of heals itself up. So we're going to push this around on our pan. I usually push it to the edge of the pan. I try to get the yolk underneath the spatula as well. If your eggs are a bit older, the yolk might separate from the egg, and that is okay, but not really what you want for over easy. So because our white is now firm, but you know there's no browning on the edge, we can go ahead and flip this. We're going to flip. You can see, you know, maybe a little bit of crisping on the edge. That's okay. You can see that this yolk is like kind of peeking out, but it hasn't broken yet. In order to keep it so that way it doesn't break, you don't want to touch this. You don't want to touch it until the white has sort of fully set. You can see right through here, there is a bit of, you know, you can still see it's a little bit translucent there, so you can still see the yolk kind of peeking through. You want this to wait a little bit so you don't break that yolk. I'm going to flip the camera around and season it real quick, and then we'll be back. Right, we're going to season that egg real quick. I usually prefer to just pinch the salt, but you have this salt shaker that actually doesn't really work because the salt in it is too fine. So I'm going to take a small pinch, you don't need a lot. I season the top right here. And then just like that, and we're good. So now you can see that it is sort of starting to bubble. I'm going to try to not drop my phone in here. And if you lift underneath the yolk, you can see that there's not much resistance. You shouldn't feel much resistance. Now it's moving around. And if we scoot that spatula underneath and we flip it again, we'll see that this yolk has started to set, but it's not fully set yet. And we're going to transfer this over to the plate. You could always flip it on the other side as well. And if I take my fork, we're going to move this to the counter so that way I don't break my plates. You can see that yolk running. So that is an over easy egg. You want this yolk to be runny. Over medium, the yolk would still be jammy inside. And it would not run like this. You want to keep your heat on low because otherwise your edges will burn before your middle has had a chance to set. If you're doing an over medium or over hard. Over hard, yolk would be fully sort of pale yellow, or like, you know, the hard-boiled egg kind of yellow. This next one is going to be over hard, which is the same process, but we're going to make it until the yolk is fully set. So we're going to crack this in here, and you can hear it sizzle. Did that one-handed. Alright, yolks are going in the sink right now, just while we cook. So you can see it immediately starts to cook the bottom, especially now that the pan is a lot more warm. So if the pan is now very hot, you can see this oil kind of moves around very easily. It's not as thick. You can see that's very thin right there. I'm going to let this bottom cook just a little bit. We want this part to be a little bit more cooked than that, because this is basically still fresh cracked. You can basically see the difference. You can see the pan through it. I don't actually know if you can on camera, but you can usually see the dark pan underneath. You might get some like large bubbles trying to form. That's okay. You can always pop them, or you can just leave them, but eggs can sometimes flatter, so popping it usually helps to prevent it from exploding later. I usually flip it several times to keep it from burning on either side if you're doing it over medium or over hard. But if you like those crispy edges, feel free to just leave it on one side and then flip it once, or maybe twice, to make sure both sides are properly cooked. So we're going to let this sit for a while, and we'll be back. Alright, my phone does not like the heat. It's kind of an old phone, but you can see this bubble kind of starting to form right there. You can pop that. It's usually like an air bubble, and that way, you know, if it does explode, you're not going to splash oil all over yourself. You can see now that this egg is basically free moving. You could flip it by flipping the pan handle, but this pan is too heavy for me, so we're not going to do that today. Also, I don't have very good setup to show you different angles on it. But we're going to flip this around. So we're going to shimmy that yolk onto the spatula. You want the yolk to be on your spatula because that is the heaviest part. And this gives you the least risk of like completely destroying the yolk or something like that. We're going to flip. I always flip gently. You can sort of like flip it more harshly, but I find that usually pops the yolk. And in this stage, I don't want it to pop. So you can see it's more brown on the edges than that other one. So we're going to let this cook for a while, and then we'll come back, probably flip it a couple more times just to make sure everything is cooked. You can also see on this that you can't really see through this like white and yellowish part, but you can poke it and it's still like very jiggly and fragile. So we're going to let it sit for a little bit more, and then should be an over hard egg. Alright, we're going to try to flip this now. You can see it's sort of puffed up a lot. I'm going to stick our spatula under here. It moves around pretty easily. You can actually hear it slide if you're in person. But I'm going to flip this again. You can see that it is browned on this side. You can see that it's sort of like holding its shape now. And you can also see that this is a lot more firm. It is still not fully set on the inside, and we know that because there's still like a little bit of jiggle here. And you can also kind of see it puffing up more. But we're gonna cook that. And at this point, I would flip it multiple times. So you can see now it's browning a little bit more. It's a little bit solid on this side. You can press down slightly, not too hard, otherwise you might risk popping the yolk. And it will help it just keep it from exploding later. Which I haven't had happen yet, but that might also be because I pressed them down. I'm going to take that off. Yeah. As you can see now, a lot more brown. We still have white. You can see that this edge is starting to crisp. It's still like a golden brown. I don't know if you can tell in the light, but yeah, it's still like a golden brown. When it starts to get really dark, that's when you know you're starting to burn it. You can tell. So I don't know if you can see, but it kind of keeps its shape now if I poke it. Well, that right there might be an air bubble, but I'm going to flip it one more time, and now you can see this is very crispy and brown. If I poke it, I think there's air in there, but usually if you poke it, it'll act like memory foam where it very slowly comes back up. And at this point you don't really need to go under the yolk, but it helps. I'm going to flip it one more time. There's an air bubble in there, but yeah, so you can see that. And we're going to take it to the plate. And seasoned it off camera. I also moved the other egg off the plate because we have small plates and I don't want to get a second dish. So if we cut this, you can see, so that crispy on the bottom is making it a little bit harder to cut through with just the fork. But you can see that that egg is, you can bring it into the light. You can see that that egg is fully yellow all the way through. So that is an overhard egg.